France now, where the culture minister says Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris is still in danger of collapsing. After the fire this April, the site was closed for 3 weeks for lead pollution cleanup. This week, workers returned to stabilize the structure so that reconstruction can begin. Now, what a restored Notre Dame will look like is still up for debate. Jake Saganero in Paris has more.
Just days after the blaze ripped through Notre Dame's roof and spire, French Prime Minister Édouard Philippe announced an international architecture competition.
Portant sur la reconstruction de la flèche de la cathédrale.
The competition, he says, will determine if the spire will be a replica of the 19th century design by French architect Viollet-le-Duc, or something more modern for our times. Eager architects from around the world flooded Instagram and Twitter with their visions of Notre Dame restored with contemporary flair. There were glass roofs, slick twisting spires, and garish Disney castle towers. But if you ask the French, 55% of the public wants the iconic cathedral to be restored exactly as it was before, according to a recent poll by Odoxa Densu. In June, clergy put on their vestments and hard hats to celebrate the first Mass inside Notre Dame since the fire. The service was closed to the public, but people still gathered at the barriers to ogle the ravaged Gothic cathedral. Elodie Quonca came into the city from Versailles to see the damage with her own eyes. Quonca said we should consider the times we're living in, but she's still cautious about drastically changing the aesthetic of Notre Dame.
Maybe we should make a mix between modern architecture and to respect the past.
Jean Nouvel, the most famous living French architect, known for his ultra-modern designs, said in a TV interview, Notre Dame is a testimony of culture and history, so it shouldn't be changed too much.
Nouvel
says, I think here we have to be more Gothic than ever. Ultimately, the government will make the final decision, following extensive studies and discussions with specialists, historians, and architects. But before reconstruction can begin, debris still has to be removed from inside the cathedral and the ceiling vaults stabilized.
These researchers were tasked with evaluating the condition of the damaged stone, mortar, and metal, and guiding engineers on the best way to restore the cathedral. Even as they try to reclaim what was lost, the lab researchers and others are also analyzing samples of wood and stone for clues to the cathedral's medieval past. Their first order of business, stabilizing the cathedral. The lead roof and the wooden timbers that supported it were mostly gone, and there were holes in the vaulted stone ceiling. That threatened a delicate balance of forces between the vaults, which push outward on the cathedral walls, and the flying buttresses, which provide an inward stabilizing force. In order to steady the structure, temporary wood supports were installed to prevent the buttresses from toppling the walls. To restore the balance of forces, researchers also need to understand how the stone in the walls and vault were altered by the fire. Most of Notre Dame was constructed with limestone, an iconic stone used all over Paris, including at the Louvre. At 800 degrees Celsius, limestone can turn to a soft white powder known as lime. Even before this point, at 300 degrees Celsius, fire can begin to reduce its strength. One way to estimate these changes is by looking at the color of the stone. Beige indicates a sturdy structure, while a red or black surface means the fire has damaged its internal structure. The high porosity of limestone presents another complication. As firefighters hosed down the cathedral, some stones gained almost a third of their weight in water, further changing the balance of forces between the vaults and walls. The laboratory researchers are also grappling with what happened to the lead roof. Parts of it reached the melting point of 300 degrees Celsius, dripping into the vaults and gutters. But some of the lead became airborne. Yellow smoke billowed from the cathedral as a result. The lead powder that settled after the fire is toxic to humans, making researchers take careful precautions when working in the cathedral. Before restoration even begins, much of the cathedral must be decontaminated, and the mangled scaffolding put in place for renovations prior to the fire must be removed. Meanwhile, the exposed interior and fallen fragments of the cathedral have provided new opportunities for research. One researcher is using stone samples collected from the cathedral to learn about the quarries they came from. Other materials, like the wood from the attic beams, tell the climatic history of the 12th and 13th century. The long and narrow shape of the beams also indicate that these 100-year-old trees were grown alongside many other trees, and maybe were even farmed with the intention of using the wood to build the cathedral.
Thierry Zimmer is the deputy director of a research lab analyzing the rubble, and his team will advise architects on what materials to use. Zimmer says restoring Notre Dame exactly as it was before might not even be possible. The original stones came from quarries that were, at the time, outside Paris. Now, parts of the city sit on top of those pits.
We say that all Paris, it's something like Gruyere, like a cheese with a lot of holes, yes.
Which makes it dangerous to excavate from those same spots.
We have very difficulties if, for example, we know exactly what we want, but we have no stones to do it.
If crowning Notre Dame today with a reimagined modern steeple is controversial, Viollet-le-Duc spire also caused an uproar in 1859. And even before that, French writer Victor Hugo lamented any changes to the medieval cathedral. In his famous 1831 novel, Notre Dame de Paris, he wrote, "If we had the leisure to examine the various traces of destruction imprinted upon the old church, the part of time would be the least. The worst would be men, especially men of art, since some have assumed the title of architect in the last 2 centuries." For NPR News, I'm Jake Saganaro in Paris.